guys, is it just me or are you a little tall today? Maybe I'll put a big title up here. Faces. I have you up on a stand, so it's a little different, just for fun. So I didn't have to do this. We're gonna do a face. I know this is not your first rodeo for many of you. And for some of you, you are like so excited to just, okay, can you please take it step by step? Because I want to follow along and do this just right. So I'm gonna be using the paints from the Expressive Face Tones set. So that's a set of paints that I kind of compiled together. It was really fun to work with another paint collaborator. This company's name is Peerless Watercolor Labs. And what they do is their paints are on like essentially like a little sheet of paper. And you just put water on your brush and touch the paper and it becomes paint that you can use in your painting. The face that I'm going to paint, not like I have it planned, we're just going with it, is actually not going to be as small as typically the ones that are in the Faces book. Most of the faces that I did for this book are not much larger than, say, 3 inches, maybe 2, the average being like 1.5 inches. So they're actually pretty true to size here, right on the cover of the book. This is tremendously blown out, just saying. So I'm gonna do a face. You don't have to make it look like mine. You can take your detours and, you know, make the eyes big or make the nose small or fuller or whatever, curly, straight, whatever, all those differences, you can chime in. I'm gonna go through it kind of slowly just because I'm only doing one. And like I've told you before, I tend to do a lot of them, or a lot of anything that I'm working on, so that I can kind of play with wait times when something is drying, so that we can just focus on one. I'm not going to be doing that. You can doodle on your own if you want to, but just to warn you that I am going to go slower than I usually do. I will not be talking this fast because I can't fill in that much time, so I'll chillax and my coffee will calm down and I will go through painting these faces with you. It's gonna be easy, it's gonna be fun. All right, here are the Expressive Face Tones. It's a set of 10 colors and they're all a lot of fun. I'm really excited to share these. Each one of the colors is vibrant, very fun. I have 3 right here. And so I have a Bismarck Brown, Flesh Tint, and Lips Mackin Pink, because that's just so fun to say. And then I threw in a blue color. Whenever you're wondering what color these are, because this is the color of the paint on the swatch. It's not the color that you'll see on the page. This is. So when you don't know what color you're looking at, if you see the print or the stamp on this side, then you know that this is the wrong side. This is not the paint. This is just the imprint. These swatches are smaller than they come in there. You can cut them down to make them work better with whatever your travel paint size set demands. I'm gonna start with a number 4. And you know what? I think this will be my only brush. I'm gonna stick to just the size 4 brush. It's good, middle of the road, not too big, not too small. Moving a little bit to the side here so we can see everything. And I'm gonna start with the Flesh Tint. All right, in order to activate the paint, I get my brush wet, I put it on the page, and I can go to work. So these colors are vibrant. Yep, there we go, bright orange. So even this Flesh Tint, I'm adding in more water to make it a lighter flesh tint. Now I tend to like to start with an oval for beginners when I do a crowd, when I do several faces at a time. Then I'll branch out more and use different face shapes, but when I just want to go middle of the road, something that's easy to understand, easy to break down into proportions and be easily visibly pretty, I'm going to go with an oval. When I paint my oval, I keep in mind that this is the top of the head and that is the bottom of the head. In the proportions video, we went over that and we drew lines to distinguish where things were on the face. Without those lines right now, I am just trying to imagine it as best I can. I don't want to have to draw what looks like essentially a ski mask every time that I draw a face, every time that I paint a face, I should say. So I've got a nice orange face, something that I don't do much, or don't do always, and didn't do in the Expressive Little Faces book, is to add a neck. The neck, just if you're thinking about proportions, it does kind of line up with your jawline, but the part that we tend to see is thinner than that. So when we drew 5 eyeballs across the face, we had 1 on either side of here. The neck lines up with the middle of those eyeballs. So the middle between the edge of the face and the corner of the eye. Obviously, some necks are thicker than others. We don't need to start looking at our buddies and measure their necks with our thumbs in the air as artistes would. That would make them feel very uncomfortable, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to move on to Lips Mackin Pink. We're going to come back to this color. Since these colors are so vibrant, I'm going to just kind of swash a little bit down here. You can tell I have a bit of the orange, the flesh tone still on my brush. And when I get it to the amount that I feel comfortable, the amount of paint that I feel comfortable, which is, it's not bleeding, it's not super dry, but I get a lot of color. I got my brush wet again, so that when I place it on this wet paint, this wet face, it's gonna bleed nicely and not look too much like perfect little circles. Although it's something that I really enjoy. All right. I'm going to go back to the flesh tint, and with this color, maybe a dab of that, I'm going to use this red. I want to come up with kind of a color to outline facial features. You can just use the color that we used on the skin tone in its purest form, just for the sake of contrast and it showing nicely on the camera. I wanted to go darker, so I used a bit of brown, a bit of the pink, and of course the flesh tone. Now what I'm doing with this color is I'm adding in these shadows, these outlines. Obviously when we're working in portraiture, we don't always have lines like this, you know. Visually, we just don't have that convenience of being able to paint things that are all perfectly outlined. But these are basically the shadows, the lines that fall on our faces. So I'm using this color that's the same, essentially the same color, just a darker shade of it, of what we used on the skin tone. At this point, I need to start asking myself, is this a man or a woman? Because that does affect the jawline. I think this little person could go either way. The jawline is not very rigid as a very masculine jawline would be. And yet the neck is looking a little thick to me, and I made him kind of wear a t-shirt. But I'm gonna keep going and just let myself have the freedom to decide later. All right, I'm gonna start working on, I wanna do the eyes. It's a little wet. So I'm gonna do the nose. The reason why I wanna do the nose lines up here with the bottom of the ears is because when I paint the eyes, I want them to be really nice and crisp. And when I paint the nose, I have some leverage there. It could be a fuzzy line, it could be a lighter or darker line. This is a dude with my nose. And the approach that I used for the nose here, there's some different things that you could do for noses. You could just do a couple of nostrils. You can do what I call the dots in the parentheses, period, period, dot, or parentheses, period, period, parentheses. And they also, depending on the nose, will have a shadow cast under the middle bridge that kind of shoots down over and hangs over the middle part. So you can do a lot or a little. I'll leave that up to you. I wanted to add a little bit of a shadow and it was looking a little too crisp. So all I do is I add more water, and I like to just dab my brush by twirling it. Looking around for a paper towel, because then I need to blot the paint that I just gathered on my brush and take it off. All right. When it comes to my nose, I tend to have a little shadow where it just juts out a little bit. I have the kind of nose that a kid just never grew out of. And then we've got a couple of shadows around the bridge of the nose, around that little, what I call the tunnel, from the eyes to the nose. I'm working on the outside inward so that when the paint dissipates, it creates a softer shadow. These shadows are looking pretty rigid. We want them to be nice and soft, so I'll soften them by adding in a few more brush strokes with a dry brush to smudge it out. I am ready for the eyes. When it comes to eyes, the simplest and most fun way I reckon to do eyes, obviously you could do circles, just very simple. Want to go kind of Japanese cute little stuffed animals. I like to have kind of these half circle eyes. They look happy. They're very simple to do. If I want to make it more feminine, I just add a little bit to the side to imply eyelashes. Otherwise, if I want to get more detailed, and this is possibly what I'm going to call the most favored spread in the Expressive Little Faces book, is how I go from, listen, you want to do one step eyes, you can go this way. And we go to all the way to 5 steps if you want to go more complex. So just judging on the amount of value, the darkness, and making that the most important feature in defining how much of this I want to paint. I start with that. So the highest contrast, the darkest value would be the pupils. And then we go from there. Let's say that the whole eye is shaded. Okay, well, what's the next darkest, the next step? And that would be the upper lid and the iris of the eyes. And then we move on from there. If you want to get more realistic, more complicated, then you just get more subtle with your shadows. You start to notice slight nuances. You do render a little bit here and there, the details that we overlook when we're trying to make, say, cartoons or just simple illustrations. So you see how I just built up an eye by starting with the darkest parts and then saying, no, I want to keep going, I want to keep going, I want to keep going until I have some more realistic eyes. And now I want to finish it, but I'm going to leave it there. So the eyes that I'm going to do, and I am doing this in the flesh tone, but it's not going to stay in that color, so don't get too concerned about that. Maybe a little brown because it's just weird to have orange eyes. Essentially, I'm painting, though, the outer creases of the eye. I'm going to do something in between here and there. Nice middle of the road. and middle of the head, where I know I'm going to need an upper eyelid. I'm going to use a very thin line to outline the bottom eyelid. And I also want to make sure to be careful to have my eyes nest within those two. I could show the entire bottom of it, the whole ridge, so it's almost like the eyes are looking up a little bit, but I definitely don't want to have a frightened looking person staring back at me. With the little bit of paint that I have left on my brush, I'm doing eyebrows, just basically the general shape of them, like the outline of them, the coloring, if they were more shaded. A little bit of a shadow underneath each eye to imply that we are happy. I like to draw happy people. I like to express different emotions in my paintings when I'm challenging myself, but if I'm just painting for fun, then I want them to be having fun too. So there are my eyes. I'm going to let them dry, but I've got a nice foundation of what those look like. Now, the tricky part, because it's a dude, is the mouth, right? I couldn't give my guy a bunch of eyelashes and work on his eyes too much, and I can't give him bright red lips because I do want him to be hot-blooded male. So I think I already went a little overboard. I just paint girls all the time. They're just so much more fun. No offense, guys. So I'm going to blot a little bit. Still happy I did this because you know what? We're working in layers, and having something underneath really helps me just feel more confident for the next step. Let's give him some dark brown hair. Now this is the top of the head, so if he were bald, this would be it right here. So I'm gonna imagine his hairline. His hairline's not gonna be a straight line, even if it were a fairly straight lined kind of hairline. It wouldn't be exactly straight. So hairlines do often dip in the middle, some more than others, particularly if we have a receding hairline. And if it's straight across, then, like I said, add a little bit of nuance so it doesn't feel so fake. Because we're working from a full face underneath this, we're going to need to have dark hair. If you do this again and want to have someone with light colored hair, then you'll need to define your hairline on step 1 when you are painting the face. I like to show the entire head because it just helps give a better framework for proportions until we get totally used to kind of seeing that in our mind's eye without seeing it on the paper first. All right, with the same brown, I am going to, since it's a step darker, give him a little pupil. Right, we said that this is the darkest dark, and what was our second darkest dark? It was the eyelid. Now the eyelid I'm not going to make too thick. It will easily become makeup. I didn't know I was going to draw a dude today. Give him some nostrils because they got a little lost. And the same color, maybe a touch of the pink. Am I dry? I'm just gonna do the crease of the opening of the mouth. And I was not dry. Also in the Expressive Little Faces book, we have kind of a breakdown of different ways to go about mouths. So obviously, most simplest, we do a line. We could do just the center line and the shadow underneath the bottom lip, or we can add the shadow of where the crease is, the upper lip. We could add lines to imply a smile or wrinkles. But right now my priority is in fixing this little bit of a Freddy Krueger mouth we have going on here. And all I'm doing with my brush, this is still wet, the page is still wet, the brush is a little wet, but mostly dry, is I'm blotting, I'm just massaging out, working against the grain that it's bleeding with the brush. Just smoothing and blotting. All right, still not loving it, but it's okay. I feel hopeful. All right, my next value was that brown, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a few shadows around the face where I think shadows would fall. And that would be, you know, where things intersect, you typically just want to differentiate what's what. And that's when it's fun to add a shadow kind of at the crux, the perpendicular connection between one shape and another, so that when they intersect, we know what's going on. A little bit of a shadow under there. And now I think it's dry enough for me to go back to that mouth. My paper is getting worked over with all the blotting we've been doing, and it was really wet to start with. So this is not going well, but that's good for you. It's good for you to see me suffer a little bit. Watch me struggle. And the truth is that I need to stop touching it, Amarilys. All right, fine. We got this blue. I haven't used it, and I want to. I don't think it's a very dark blue, but once it lays on the brown, then they kind of mix by touching each other. And it adds a bit of depth. I'm gonna add some fun texture lines just because I can, just because I have this fun color here that I haven't used very much, and I don't want it to just be stuck right there. I like that it's this random kind of cool contrast to all the warm colors that I've been using, so I think that's really fun. I like to follow painters that do an underpainting in a cool blue for a flesh tone. Something that I don't do that often, but I really do like seeing it. Again, my paper is just too rubbed out to take to any more lines on those lips. So I'll just add some details here and there with the eyebrows. Guys, eyebrows can be nice and a bit unruly. Not a whole lot of rules there, so that's nice. He's got some very full lips. And I, at this point, am just gunning for that white gel pen or white, opaque white paint to kind of rescue that mouth a little bit. Because if I keep working with watercolor paint there, it's just gonna get more and more like it is. It's like saturating a bit of toilet paper. There's no going back. You're not, even if you let it dry, there's just less of that stuff, less threads that it's dealing with. All right, like I said, I'm gonna go to my gel pen just because it's right here, real easy. And with the gel pen, I'm gonna bring in the whites of the eyes. I didn't worry about keeping this part of the paper showing white so that I could just go straight to painting and again just focus on my proportions. This paper is still wet, but I'm so close to done. I want to be done for you guys. With the white, I'm giving him a little bit of a highlight on the top of his lips. And I have met this guy before. It's so funny how that happens. His name was Raphael. Stay still. All right, let's add some details in here. And we've got a face. I never know who I'm gonna meet on my paper. I always think they're gonna end up looking like me because I tend to do that. So there is my face. There you see how I just kind of play with different parts or different parts of the painting, different segments of just the creating session. Try out different colors down here. And there you have it. There's my face. Go make a face. It doesn't have to look anything like this. I'm excited to see them.